My name is Natalie Elias, and I'm 34 years old. If you'd looked at my life from the outside a few months ago, you probably would have said I'd cracked the code. Founder and CEO of Aura Designs, a high-end minimalist furniture company that somehow made clean lines and pale wood feel like luxury instead of empty space. Solid credit. A downtown loft with concrete floors, walls of glass, and a view of the city that looks softer at night when the lights blurred the edges of all the hard things. And then there was my boyfriend, Daniel Rivers, 36, my COO, my fiance, the man who brought me espresso in the mornings and texted me photos of fabric swatches in the afternoons with captions like, "This one feels like you." For a long time, I believed that. I'm the designer, the dreamer, the one who still sketches on paper before I touch CAD. Daniel was the numbers, the strategy, the sharp smile I let stand between me and the ugly parts of business. We were supposed to be the perfect split. I built the pieces, he made sure we kept the lights on. The company structure, on paper, was simple. I held 24% of the shares. My business partner, our head of sales, Gideon Ward, held 25. And the remaining 51% sat with a silent entity, Angel Investor LLC, the ghost that had wired in $2 million of seed capital and then never once voted, emailed, or walked through the door. To Daniel and Gideon, that LLC was ancient, defunct money, a dead fund from a decade ago that had tossed us a bone and then disappeared. To me, it had a face, my grandfather's. Elias and Sons had been a tiny workshop before I turned it into Aura Designs. Instead of putting his name on the cap table, he created Angel Investor LLC, wired the money, and told me, "You run your company. I'll just make sure you can't burn it down for a boy." He never showed up to anything, never asked for a dividend, just watched quietly from his iPad and sent the occasional text that usually involved insulting my choice of footwear. No one else knew he was the ghost, including Daniel. That was my first mistake. Last week, I was working late. My office sits next to Daniel's, separated by a glass wall and a sliding door. When we first moved in, HR joked that it was cute that we'd designed ourselves adjoining offices. It wasn't about cute, it was about proximity. I liked being close to the numbers guy. I'd been in the zone for hours, headphones clamped over my ears, pencil smudging gray on cheap sketch paper, while lo-fi beats blurred out the pinging of Slack. Around 8 p.m., my hand cramped. I pulled my headphones off and leaned back, letting the silence rush in. Except it wasn't silent. Daniel's voice slipped through the glass, bright and amused, floating on speakerphone. "Gid, listen to me. It's dead money. That fund hasn't moved in 10 years. No emails, no votes, nothing. The only active shareholders are you and Nat. You've got 25. She's got 24. Do the math." I froze. Gideon's voice came through the wall, tinny and uncertain. "You're saying What? I just tell her to step down? Man, she started this thing." Daniel laughed. It was a laugh I used to love, full, confident, like he'd already won whatever argument we were having. Tonight it scraped down my spine. "You don't ask her anything," he said. "We call an emergency board meeting. You, as the majority voting shareholder, call a vote of no confidence. You vote her out as CEO. I step in as interim. Then we do a fresh issue of shares to reward leadership and loyalty. You get a bigger slice. I get mine. We offer her a small buyout so she can go be an artist somewhere. It's clean." There was a beat of silence on the line. "She's not going to just go," Gideon murmured. "You know Nat. She'll fight." "She won't," Daniel said, like he knew me better than I knew myself. "She's a designer, not a killer. She hates confrontation. The minute you make it formal, she'll fold. And between us, she's holding Aura back. Her new lines are nostalgia, not innovation. You and I are the future here." My blood went cold first, then hot, then oddly calm, like my body couldn't decide what to do with itself. This was my fiancé, the man I had asked to marry me on our living room floor with takeout containers between us because it felt like we were already building a life together. The man I trusted with my bank accounts, my company, my name. "And what about you and her?" Gideon asked, awkwardness bleeding into the speaker. "Look, I'm not trying to get between you two." "That's been over for months," Daniel said, cheery, efficient, like he was moving an outdated skew into clearance. "I'm just waiting for the right time. This is it, Gid. We get paid what we're worth, we put the company in capable hands, and she gets to paint chairs in a cabin somewhere. Everybody wins." He chuckled. Let's vote her off the board and take her shares. I didn't realize I'd stood up until my chair scraped against the concrete. For a second, I thought about walking away, pretending I hadn't heard it, finding some gentler way to address what I'd just learned. Then I looked at the reflection of myself in the glass wall, messy bun, smudged hands, tired eyes, and something inside me snapped into a different shape. I slid the interconnecting door open without knocking. Daniel didn't even jump. He just rolled his chair slowly toward me, eyes flickering to the phone, then to my face. He hit end call with his thumb like he was hanging up on a spam number. "You weren't supposed to hear that," he said. "Not, I'm sorry. Not this isn't what it sounds like. Just irritation, sharp and clean, like I'd interrupted a meeting about catering." I stood there in the doorway, fingers numb. "Yeah," I said, and my voice sounded far away. "That's kind of the problem, isn't it?" He smoothed the front of his suit, the $5,000 one I'd told him he looked unfairly good in this morning. He didn't even bother to walk closer. "Nat, don't be dramatic," he said. "It's business. You built something incredible, but you're not the one to scale it anymore. You know that. Look at you. You're happiest with a pencil in your hand. You hate the boardroom. Let me do what I do best." "You mean steal my company," I said, "from the woman you're engaged to marry." He exhaled through his nose, like I'd disappointed him. "We both know the engagement has been off for a while," he said. "This is just me being honest first. Aura needs a killer at the wheel. You're not a killer, Nat. You're an artist. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you try to fight this, you're going to make it ugly for everyone, including yourself." Something inside me went very still. I thought about the first prototype chair I built in my grandfather's garage, the one he'd sat in, and nodded before wiring $2 million into an account, with a name that sounded like it belonged to a stranger. I thought about the nights I slept under my drafting table because I couldn't afford both rent and payroll at the beginning. I thought about the ring on my finger and the way Daniel's hand had shaken just a little when he slid it on. "You're underestimating me," I said quietly. He smiled. "No, I'm finally being honest about you." I held his gaze for 3 long seconds, long enough for him to see that whatever part of me used to bend around his certainty had just uncoiled. "Good luck, Daniel," I said. I turned and walked back to my office. Behind me, I heard him scoff, a soft, disbelieving sound, like I'd just refused a glass of wine instead of a betrayal. By the time I closed my office door, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from a rage so cold it felt almost peaceful, like standing on a frozen lake and knowing exactly where the cracks were. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up my email. To Gideon Ward, Daniel Rivers, CC, Angel Investor LLC. Subject, emergency board meeting, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Per the bylaws of Aura Designs, an emergency board meeting is hereby called for tomorrow at 2 p.m. in conference room A. Attendance required. I stared at the cursor for a moment, then added one last line. Agenda to follow. I hit send. The third address on that email, the one that looked like it belonged to a faceless fund, didn't go to a ghost. It went straight to my grandfather's iPad. For a minute, all I could hear was my own pulse in my ears. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. A printer whirred. The office kept moving, oblivious. My phone buzzed on the desk. Grandpa, 2 p.m. tomorrow. About time, I'll be there. Wear a jacket, not that stretched-out hoodie. You're a CEO, not a college student. A laugh punched out of me, half hysterical, half relieved. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sudden, dizzying realization that I was not alone in this. I slid the phone face down, took a breath, and looked through the glass at Daniel's silhouette in his office. He was already pacing, already plotting, already certain the game was his to win. Let him think that, I thought. Let them both walk into that room tomorrow believing I'm not a killer. I pulled a fresh sheet of paper onto my desk and started sketching. Not furniture, but angles, positions, the layout of conference room A, where the chairs sat, where the door was, where my grandfather would stand when he walked in. If they wanted a boardroom battle, fine. I was done pretending I didn't know how to fight. The next day lasted a year. I barely slept. When I did, it was in strange, jerky snatches, my brain stitching together images of Daniel sliding a contract toward Gideon, of my grandfather's cane tapping out a countdown on a boardroom table I'd chosen. By the time my alarm went off, I was already awake. I dressed slower than usual. Black slacks, white blouse, charcoal blazer, my presentation armor, My fingers hovered over my old college hoodie for a second, and I heard my grandfather's text in my head. "You're a CEO, not a college student." Blazer it was. When I walked into the office, I could feel it. It's amazing how quickly air can change without actually changing. The same coffee smell, the same hum of the HVAC, the same polite morning from the receptionist. But beneath it, something new and metallic thrummed. Anticipation, gossip, fear. Two designers at the sample wall stopped whispering when they saw me and suddenly pretended to be fascinated with a chair leg they'd already finalized 3 weeks ago. A project manager crossed the lobby a little too fast, eyes fixed on her phone like she'd just remembered an urgent email. They knew something, or at least they sensed it. Daniel arrived 15 minutes after me, coat draped over his arm, tie loosened just enough to say, "I'm in control, but I'm relatable." He didn't look at me when he passed. He didn't need to. His shoulders had that loose, rolling confidence I recognized from pitch days when he knew he had a room in the palm of his hand. He was already walking like the CEO. Gideon slipped in behind him, almost literally in his shadow. Pale, restless eyes, phone clenched in his hand like a lifeline. He glanced toward my office once, just once, and when our eyes met, he flinched like he'd touched a live wire and quickly looked away. Guilt looks the same in everyone, a constant, twitchy search for an exit. I went to my office, closed the door, and gave myself exactly 30 seconds. 30 seconds to let the anger flare hot. 30 seconds to feel the ache in my chest where the word fiancé used to sit comfortably, like a well-loved chair that suddenly has a broken leg. 30 seconds to want to scream, cry, text him paragraphs that started with, "How could you?" and ended with, "Please don't." Then I picked up the feelings, folded them, and set them on a shelf in my mind. I could take them down later. Right now, I needed a different version of myself. My laptop screen woke up to my calendar. The 2 p.m. block glared at me. Emergency board meeting, Conf Room A. I opened our financial dashboard, intending to print the latest P&L numbers for all lines, especially the alias line, the one Daniel had dismissed as nostalgia. The system prompted me for my credentials. I logged in. Access denied. I stared at the screen, thinking I'd mistyped something. Tried again. Same message. I got up and walked straight to Daniel's office before I could overthink it. He was on the phone, lounging back in his chair, feet almost touching the edge of his desk. He saw me in the doorway, smiled, and held up one finger, as if I were an intern interrupting his very important call. "Yeah, so post-meeting we announce a leadership transition," he was saying. "Stability, renewed focus, all that. The board's fully aligned. Yeah, no, Aura's not going anywhere but up." He finally clicked off and leaned back, lacing his hands behind his head. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" he asked. "You locked me out of our financials," I said. No preamble. He tilted his head. "Must be an IT glitch. Your reset must not have gone through." "Daniel," I said. I didn't raise my voice. "I know our systems. COOs don't accidentally lock CEOs out of their own reports." He shrugged. "Either way, don't worry your creative head about it. I'll be presenting the numbers at the meeting. The real numbers." The real numbers. I could practically see the falsified spreadsheets in his mind. Charts colored to tell a story where my designs were dragging us under, projections tweaked just enough to sound plausible while painting me as reckless, outdated, dangerous to the bottom line. "So you're going to lie," I said, on record. He smiled with only half his mouth. "I'm going to protect the company. Sometimes that looks like telling hard truths. You should try it." There was a time his confidence made me feel safe, like I could lean against it and focus on the things I loved. Now it felt like standing too close to a cliff edge, realizing the railing you'd trusted is just painted cardboard. "You know, you could still make this easy," he added. "If you resign before the meeting, we can talk about a severance. Small, but respectful. You step down, we avoid the words 'fired for cause' on your record. It's a win for everyone." "For my own good," I said, tasting the words. "Right?" He brightened a little, as if pleased I was catching on. "Exactly. You're too talented to have this follow you around, Nat. Don't let your pride make things worse." He was so sure the story we were in was the one he was telling. "See you at 2, I said. He rolled his eyes slightly. "Have it your way." Back in my office, my phone buzzed with a new email. Subject: Office Transition. CEO Suite and Asset Allocation. From Daniel Rivers. CC Gideon Ward. Executive Assistant, Operations. My stomach clenched before I even opened it. As part of the upcoming leadership transition, it read, please arrange for my move into the CEO's office by end of day tomorrow. Additionally, ensure that the alias prototype chair, serial 001, is relocated to my new office. As the company's most valuable brand artifact, it should remain with the acting CEO. He wanted my chair, the first alias, the one with the imperfect seam on the underside of the armrest that only I and my grandfather knew about because I'd shown him, horrified, and he'd said, good, imperfection means a human made it. That's value, not shame. The chair he'd sat in when he agreed to fund the company. To Daniel, it wasn't a story or a memory, it was a trophy, a thing to sit in while he rehearsed speeches about vision and innovation and courage, pretending the wood under him had ever answered to his name. I read the email twice, breathing slowly. Then I hit reply all. Per company bylaws, all leadership positions and corporate assets, including the alias prototype chair, will be confirmed following the 2 p.m. board meeting, I wrote. Do not move the chair without explicit written authorization from the board. My fingers were steady now. When I hit send, I imagined him reading it, jaw tightening, feeling for the first time a tiny, unfamiliar sensation. Resistance. A text pinged. Grandpa, how's the office coup? Did you eat? I stared at the question. I hadn't. Nat, no. Grandpa, eat. Fainting in front of idiots is bad theater. I smiled despite myself. I could see him in his kitchen, glasses halfway down his nose, iPad propped up against the sugar canister he never used. The man who had once told me, completely straight-faced, that love was a beautiful distraction right up until it tries to sign on to your cap table. He'd also cried when I'd told him Daniel and I were engaged, wiping his eyes with a shop rag and mumbling something about dust. I wondered if he'd cry today. I doubted it. By late morning, the office's thin layer of pretense had almost worn through. Whispers folded into longer breaks by the coffee machine. People kept finding reasons to walk past conference room A, where the blinds were open and the big oak table sat waiting like a stage. I saw Gideon once more, around lunch. He came out of his office, stopped when he saw me, then forced himself forward like he'd rehearsed bravery in the mirror. Hey, Nat, he said, voice too bright. Big day, huh? Apparently, I said. He swallowed. His eyes kept darting toward Daniel's door down the hall. Look, whatever happens in there, it's not personal. Isn't it? I asked. He flinched. I'm just trying to do what's best for the company. You know that. I held his gaze until the silence stretched. Do you? I asked quietly. He looked away first. See you at 2, he muttered, already retreating. He disappeared back into his office and shut the door. I had a sudden, clear image of him on the other side, sweating, rehearsing lines Daniel had fed him, telling himself a story where he was a victim, not an accomplice. I went back to my desk and pulled out the incorporation binder from the bottom drawer. The original one, from when Aura was still just a dream and a lawyer in a too-tight suit who kept asking if I was sure about this, because it was a lot of responsibility for someone your age. Page after page of bylaws, clauses, provisions. I'd read them before, I read them again. I highlighted the lines about voting rights, majority ownership, cause for termination. I marked the paragraph about falsification of financial records and the one about attempts to defraud the company or its shareholders. If Daniel wanted to pretend this was just business, I was going to make sure we played by the rules he was so eager to twist. Around 1:45, a notification popped up. Visitor signed in, Elias Henry. My chest tightened. I stepped out of my office just in time to see him at the far end of the hallway, striding, or as close as he came to striding these days, toward me. 3-piece suit, pocket square, polished shoes, cane in his right hand, its carved wooden tip ticking softly against the hardwood. My cane, technically. A flawed leg from an early table prototype I hadn't had the heart to throw away. He'd scooped it up, sanded it, stained it, and turned it into an accessory that looked like it had always belonged to him. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his presence filled the corridor. Morning, boss, he said when he reached me. I'm the boss, I replied automatically. He raised an eyebrow. We'll make sure of that in about 15 minutes. He studied my face for a long, uncomfortable moment. I could feel him cataloging the faint shadows under my eyes, the tightness around my mouth, the way my shoulders were squared like I was holding something heavy. Do you love him? He asked finally. No preface, no softening. I swallowed. I thought I did. And now? I thought about Daniel's laugh through the wall, his calm plan to carve me out of my own company, his email about moving into my office and taking my chair like they were both obviously already his. "Now I love this place more," I said, "and myself, a little." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Love that can be itemized on a balance sheet isn't love, it's a liability." He patted my arm once, briskly. "Let's go scare some idiots." We walked toward conference room A together. Employees scattered from the doorway like loose papers in a breeze, suddenly remembering tasks elsewhere. Through the glass, I could see the table, 11 chairs, pitch-perfect lighting. My own reflection, small and sharp beside my grandfather. My eyes flicked to the far corner where the alias prototype chair sat against the wall, waiting. Its oak back curved like a question mark. I caught its eye. Ridiculous thought, but that's what it felt like. If someone sits in that chair today, I thought, it will be because I let them. I put my hand on the door handle, feeling the weight of wood and metal and years. Whatever happened in this room, I wasn't walking in as the woman Daniel had mistaken me for. I wasn't a killer, but I had built every inch of this place with my own 2 hands. And I was done letting anyone mistake that for weakness. The moment I opened the conference room door, every conversation died. Daniel was already seated at the head of the table, my seat. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled, posture loose and confident. He looked like a man already delivering the victory speech he'd been practicing in his mirror all morning. To his right sat Gideon, pale and fidgeting with his pen. His knee bounced under the table. I wondered if Daniel had noticed. Probably not. Daniel never looked down unless it was at numbers or people he thought he owned. "Natalie," he said smoothly, like he hadn't locked me out of my company 12 hours ago. "Glad you could make it." "It's my meeting," I said, sliding into a seat halfway down the table. "Of course I made it." He smiled thinly. "It was your meeting, but as acting majority shareholder, Gideon has yielded the floor to me. As COO, I'll be running this." "Acting majority?" I repeated, eyes on Gideon. "That's an interesting phrase." Gideon coughed, not meeting my gaze. Daniel just tapped the binder in front of him. Thick, glossy, full of graphs that meant nothing. "Let's start," he said, voice brisk. "The agenda is simple. First, a review of company performance under your leadership. Second, a vote of no confidence in you as CEO." I leaned back, folded my arms. "And third?" He smirked. "Third is the part where we fix everything that's been holding Aura Designs back." He opened the binder and turned it toward me. "As you can see, the alias line is down 40% quarter over quarter. Our new projects are massively over budget. Frankly, we're trending toward insolvency." I looked at the pages. Data columns altered, charts too perfect, conclusions too neat. "That's not true," I said evenly. "I checked the reports last night." "You checked the wrong reports," he said, voice clipped now. "These are the real numbers, which brings us to the second item." He turned to Gideon. "Vote of no confidence in the current CEO." Gideon cleared his throat. "Yeah, Natalie, this isn't easy, but—" "Spare me the monologue," I said quietly. He winced. I vote no confidence." Daniel's grin widened. "Excellent. That's 25%. He turned toward me. "You have 24. Gideon has the majority of active board votes. The motion passes. Effective immediately, you're removed as CEO. I'll be stepping in as interim CEO, while the board—" He didn't get to finish. The door opened behind him. A soft tap. Tap. Tap of a cane echoed against the floor. Every head turned. My grandfather, Henry Elias, stepped into the room. 82, silver hair combed perfectly back, gray suit pressed within an inch of its life. The carved wooden cane, my flawed table leg, gleamed in his hand. Daniel frowned. "I'm sorry, who are you? This is a closed meeting." Henry didn't answer. He walked, slowly but with a kind of authority that made every second louder, to the head of the table. When he stopped beside Daniel, he smiled. It wasn't friendly. "Young man," he said, "you're sitting in my chair." Daniel blinked. "Excuse me?" My grandfather looked at me. "You didn't introduce me, Natalie." I stood, heart hammering, voice steady. "Everyone, this is Henry Elias, managing partner of Angel Investor LLC. He holds 51% of Aura Designs." Gideon went white, not pale, white. His mouth opened and closed without sound. Daniel laughed, short and incredulous. "That's impossible. Angel Investor is a defunct fund from 10 years ago." "Defunct?" my grandfather repeated mildly. He set his cane down with a soft click. "Son, I am many things, but defunct isn't one of them. I've funded this company, my money, my rules. You might want to read the incorporation documents next time before staging a coup." The room was silent. Daniel's face twisted. This is a conflict of interest. It's nepotism. It's capitalism, Henry interrupted. Do sit down. Daniel bristled, but something in my grandfather's tone, calm, absolute, made him obey before he realized he'd done it. Henry settled into the chair at the head of the table, his chair, and tapped the cane once. Now, Natalie, what's the motion on the floor? I looked at Daniel, then at Gideon, then back to my grandfather. I move, I said clearly, to remove Daniel Rivers from the board of directors and terminate his employment for cause, effective immediately, for conspiracy to defraud the company, attempted theft of assets, and falsification of financial records. Henry raised his hand. I second. He looked around the table. All in favor? I lifted my hand. He lifted his. That's 75%, he said. Motion passes. Daniel stood, voice shaking. You can't do this. You don't even know what you're doing. I built this company with her. Henry's eyes didn't waver. You built yourself a throne out of her work. It's time to step down before you choke on it. Daniel's face reddened. You'll regret this, both of you. You're making a huge mistake. Henry pressed a button on the conference phone. Security, please escort Mr. Rivers from the building. Make sure he doesn't touch his computer. His personal items can be shipped. 2 guards appeared, like they'd been waiting for the signal. Daniel spun toward me, eyes wild now. You think you won, Natalie? You don't have what it takes to run this place without me. I met his gaze. My voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut. We'll see. As they led him out, his shoulder brushed mine. I didn't flinch. The door closed behind him with a soft, perfect click. The silence that followed was deafening. Gideon's pen rolled off the table and hit the floor. He didn't pick it up. My grandfather leaned back in the chair, studying him. Mr. Ward, he said, tone almost conversational, you and I are going to have a long talk about your future, or lack thereof. Gideon nodded quickly, eyes darting to the door. Yes, sir, I understand. Good, Henry said. Then perhaps we can salvage something useful from this circus. He turned to me. Natalie. I straightened instinctively. Yes? He smiled, a small, approving curve of the mouth. You handled that well. Now go get your chair, the real one. I exhaled, realizing for the first time that I'd been holding my breath since I'd walked in. Outside the glass wall, the office buzzed again. Whispers, movement, rumors already spinning. Inside, I stood surrounded by binders full of false numbers and the lingering ghost of a man who thought he owned me. I looked at my grandfather, who still sat steady and calm at the head of the table. The chair was his, yes, but the company, the designs, the soul of it, that was mine. And for the first time since the night before, I allowed myself to feel it. Not relief, not triumph, just the quiet pulse of something sharper. Freedom. It's been a month. The dust has finally started to settle. The first week after the coup was chaos. Press statements, lawyers, accountants trying to trace who had access to what. I barely slept. The office felt like walking through smoke after a fire. The structure still standing, but the smell of something burned, lingering everywhere. People avoided my eyes at first. Then slowly, one by one, they started coming by my office again. Some to apologize, some just to see if I was still standing. I was. A little singed, maybe, but standing. The first question everyone asked was the same. What happened to Gideon? They expected me to fire him. God knows he deserved it. But my grandfather said something I can't forget. Don't fire a snake when you can defang it and make it work for you. Firing him is easy. Making him stay, that's justice. So we didn't fire him. Instead, we called him in for another meeting. Just me, Grandpa, and Gideon. Gideon looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit hung wrong, his hair was a mess. He kept wringing his hands, trying to look remorseful, trying to guess what version of humility would save him. Mr. Ward, my grandfather began, voice steady, almost kind. Did you bring what we asked for? Gideon nodded and slid a folder across the table. It was full of the real financial reports, the ones Daniel had replaced. He'd highlighted every falsified cell, every changed projection. He'd signed an affidavit detailing everything. He was very, very cooperative. Grandpa skimmed the pages, nodded once, then pulled a different folder from his briefcase. Thicker, heavier. He slid it toward Gideon. This is your new contract, he said. Gideon looked at it like it might bite him. You'll remain head of sales, my grandfather continued. Your 25% profit share stays intact. You'll still make a great deal of money, as long as she does a great job. He gestured toward me. Gideon blinked. So, I'm not fired? Grandpa smiled faintly. No, you're trapped. I watched Gideon's face shift. confusion, hope, and then unease as he began to read. His shares were now non-voting. His board seat, gone. The contract tied him to the company for 5 years. If he quit, or if he was fired for cause, his profit share would be bought back by the company for $1. One. He looked up, pale. You can't. I can, Grandpa said. And you already agreed when you signed the last contract without reading it. I suggest you read this one carefully. Gideon signed it. He didn't even finish reading. When he left, I stared at the door for a long time. Why not just let him go? I asked. Grandpa smiled. Because watching him work under you, making money for you, knowing he'll never touch control again, that's the kind of punishment that actually teaches a lesson. I didn't argue. And Daniel? He did what I expected. He lawyered up. 3 weeks after the meeting, we got a letter. Thick, self-righteous, printed on embossed stationery. It demanded $5 million for wrongful termination, defamation, and, my personal favorite, emotional distress due to a broken engagement. I laughed when I read that line. Grandpa didn't. He handed the letter to his attorney, the kind of man who makes opposing counsel reconsider their career choices, and told him 2 pages, polite but lethal. The reply went out the next morning. Page 1, a cease and desist. Page 2, Gideon's signed affidavit, screenshots of Daniel's falsified data, and a copy of the termination for cause clause in his own contract that he had clearly never read. Daniel's lawyer went silent. Not even a courtesy follow-up. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. You think you're so smart. You and that senile old bastard. You'll never be half the killer I am. You'll run that company into the ground in 6 months. I gave you 3 years of my life. I read it twice. Then I typed back. Your math is as bad as your ethics. Goodbye, Daniel. And I blocked the number. That night, I went into his old office. It still smelled faintly like his cologne. Expensive, clinical, hollow. On the empty desk sat the ring box. I'd left it there earlier that afternoon, right before security packed up the rest of his things. I opened it one last time. The diamond caught the light, cold and brilliant. It looked like it belonged in a museum labeled Objects That Once Meant Something. I closed the box, set it back down, and walked out. The next morning, the Alias prototype chair was gone from the office. I found it later that week in my grandfather's study. He'd supervised the move himself. When I walked in, he was sitting in it, leaning back, cane balanced across his knees. He didn't look up right away, just ran a hand along the armrest, the one with the tiny imperfection I'd once thought ruined it. Finally, he nodded to himself. Good. Then he looked at me. Now get back to work. These designs are getting a little stale. He was joking, I think. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd managed in weeks. We didn't talk about Daniel after that, or Gideon, or the headlines. Some wounds don't need conversation. They just need time and quiet work. Now, every night, when the office empties and the city hums below, I sit at my desk again, pencil in hand. Same cheap paper, same desk lamp glow. Only now there's space. No whispering doubts. No one telling me I'm not a killer. No one trying to steal the heartbeat I built into this place. I don't feel triumphant, just clean. The betrayal was surgical. It cut out something that had been rotting inside me for a long time. Something I didn't know was there until it was gone. People keep calling it a happy ending. It isn't. Not really. It's not sad either. It's just an ending. And endings are sometimes the only way to start over. Aura Designs is secure. My family's name is intact. And for the first time in a long, long time, I'm free.